Welcome to today's webinar. And the title of today's webinar is How Fiscal Sponsorship Can Unlock Donor Funding for Your NGO or CBO. And your speaker today is Michael Kimanzi, the founder of Africads. And so, who is Michael Kimanzi? So Michael Kimanzi is the founder of Africads, he's a professional sociologist, a certified Google Ad Grant specialist. Actually, we work with nonprofit and we help them secure this Google Ads grant, which they can use to get known all over the world, attract digital donations, attract volunteers, and what have you. I've worked with some of the best in the industry, the likes of the Stroke Association of Kenya, Maji and Ufanisi, the Trevor project that's based in the New York, Medical Benevolence Foundation based in Texas, the Agape network based in Miami. And so, like I said earlier on, we are going to cover fiscal sponsorship, and by the end of this webinar, you'll know what fiscal sponsorship is, how you can go out there and secure one for your nonprofit, the common pitfalls, the benefits, and how to position your nonprofit to win the hearts of fiscal sponsors. So let's dive in. So today the role of this webinar is to explore how we can circumnavigate the funding problem. And this funding problem is further compounded by the death of USAID. And USAID was one of the anchor donors in Kenya. And so what next? So many NGOs and CBOs are lacking funding. And the root cause of this is because most donors, especially in the US, they are rejecting proposals due to lack of compliance and credibility. And this is where the fiscal sponsorship comes in. So, what is fiscal sponsorship? Before I explain what fiscal sponsorship is, I want to give you an interesting fact. You see, US, beside being the biggest donation and grant market in the world, it's also among the few countries that reward donors for giving. What do I mean by rewarding donors for giving? You see, when you're in the US and you give to a nonprofit that's registered and is in compliant with this law called the 501 into bracket C to bracket 3, this nonprofit is obliged to give you a tax receipt which you can take it to the IRS, or rather the Internal Revenue Authority, and claim for a refund. So meaning most givers in the US, they don't give from a compassion point of view, but rather from a reciprocity point of view, whereby if I give to this nonprofit, my taxable income will go down, or rather my taxes will reduce. And this doesn't apply only to individuals, it applies to organizations as well, or rather corporate organizations with robust corporate social responsibility program. So the more they also donate to non-profits which are duly registered and comply with the 501 into bracket C to bracket 3 law, the more they get to save billions of dollars in tax savings. So what is this 501 into bracket C into bracket 3? So this is a legal provision in the US that establishes and recognizes non-profits over there. It's also the law under which donors who give can go and claim refund. So this law kind of create an incentive for both corporate organizations and individuals to give more, and that's why the culture of giving in the US is so robust. So what is fiscal sponsorship? Fiscal sponsorship is when a nonprofit in one country, and in this case, we'll just focus with the US, and we'll know why we are focusing with the US in a couple of slides later. So this is when a nonprofit that's based in the US and is duly registered and has a 501 into bracket C into bracket 3 status agrees to let another project or an organization, let's say like your nonprofit that's based here in Kenya, to use its legal and tax exempt status So this means that your non-profit that's based in Kenya can receive those tax deductible donations and grants which you can tap directly without the 501 into bracket C into bracket 3 status. So in short, fiscal sponsors act as your umbrella. They collect funds on your behalf, they pass these funds to you while making sure everything is legal and transparent in the eyes of the US government. So, this is how the process works. So, the fiscal sponsor collects the grants and donations that are earmarked for your project from the kind donors. They process the tax receipts for them so that they can go request for refund. They take this money and disburse to your project, and now your job is to create impact and also to create reports, accountability reports, which you can send them so that they can compile these reports and send them to the ARS in order to be compliant. So why fiscal sponsorship and not any other route? You see, US is the largest donation and grants market in the world for obvious reason because it's the biggest economy in the world as well, and because also of the law of the 503 into bracket C into bracket 3 law, which incentivizes donors to give. And according to Giving US, in 2022 alone, Americans donated about $5 billion. Yes, you have that right. $500 billion. This is more than double the GDP of all the countries in the East Africa. And about 75% of this came from individual donors. You know, people who give $50 here, $100 there. Yep. And so this is a massive untapped resource for nonprofits that are based here in Kenya. And fiscal sponsorship gives you a platform to tap into this massive resource. So fiscal sponsorship gives you a nonprofit credibility, compliance, and donor trust. How? Let me start with credibility. You see, when you enter into a legal agreement with a fiscal sponsor, that's registered and has a recognized 501 into bracket C to bracket 3. Your non-profit, your CBO, your children's home, or whatever non-profit entity you're running will appear more established and trustworthy in the eyes of the donor. Compliance. You see, fiscal sponsors ensures that the donations and the grants they forward to you comply with the US law. They also manage these funds legally. They also help you file reports, and the last thing is that they verify that the money they are sending to you is being put into proper use. How about donor trust? You see, most donors in the US will feel secure knowing that their tax deductible gifts are being monitored by a reputable fiscal sponsor. And this ensures their money is safe and is being used for the intended purpose. So we have about 6 types of models of fiscal sponsorship, but only two are common, Model A and Model C. I want you to ignore this standalone formation for a while. I'll get back to this. So, Model A. So, under Model A, when you enter into an agreement with a fiscal sponsor, you'll be provided by either with two choices, either Model A or Model C. Under Model A, and under Model A, there is no legal separation between your project and the sponsor. Once you get on board, you become a single entity, meaning that the sponsor has all the say. You have very little autonomy when it comes to steering your project. But under Model C, you become separate entities. The fiscal sponsor is a separate entity, your project or your non-profit is a separate entity. It's more of a grantor-grantee relationship. And in both models, once you enter into a legal agreement, that agreement becomes operational immediately. When it comes to control, like I said earlier, under Model A, you have less control over your project or your nonprofit. But under Model C, you have more independence. You can decide to pivot if you have fresh insights. You can decide to pivot a project, or you can decide to take a different direction. And the fiscal sponsor won't refuse. In both models, compliance is the compliance task is handled by the fiscal sponsor. Now, when I say compliance, I mean the regular filing of reports with the IRS, the auditing of accounts regularly, ensuring that you have insurance and all that. You see, in the US, there's a legal provisions that requires all the non-profits to be insured. And so when you enter into an agreement with the fiscal sponsor, you get that insurance cover as well. When it comes to the costs, both under both model, the fiscal sponsor uh, fee is usually about 8 to 15% of the money they've collected on your behalf. So, what do we mean by standalone formation, the one marked in red? So, standalone formation means rather than using a fiscal sponsor to tap into the US donation and grants market, you go there and open an outpost, an office. And this route is very lengthy and super expensive. Why? You must register and incorporate. And, the time frame for incorporating non-profit in the US takes between 12 and 18 months. But then the advantage is that you'll have full control over everything. And then you'll need again to hire lawyers and accountants to help you with the IRS filings, audit. Again, like I said, you'll need an insurance. Because, like I said, there's a legal provision that requires all the non-profits in the US to be insured, to have a liability insurance. Then, yeah. So basically, it's super expensive. And rather than taking the route of standalone formation, you can just opt to have a fiscal sponsor who will just deduct 8 to 15% commission fee from the money they'll collect on your behalf. So, assuming you've entered into a legal agreement with a fiscal sponsor, what sources of fund can you tap into? Number one, a fiscal sponsor gives you access to private foundations that only fund non-profits with a 501 into bracket C into bracket 3 legal status. Secondly, you become eligible to for the US federal and state funding opportunities. The other the other source of funding is corporate gifts. You see, in the US, there are so many organizations with a robust CSR program, but then they can't donate directly to non-profits that are based in Kenya. Why? Because how else will they go to claim the tax savings that they've gotten as a result of giving? So once you enter into a legal agreement with the fiscal sponsor, you now become eligible to tap for to tap into this corporate social responsibility money. And usually some of these corporate organizations, they also have a program called the matching gift program, whereby they tell you, hey, if you're able to collect, let's say, $50,000, we will match the same. Last but not the least, the individual donations. You see, a fiscal sponsor gives you the legitimacy to tap into tax deductible donations from individuals who usually give $10 here, $50 here, $100 here. Yep. So to sum this up, a fiscal sponsor gives you ability to tap into organizational grants, from private foundations, government, and corporate, or individual donations, from ordinary folks, who gives $5 here, $10, $20, that what have you. So, what are the services provided by fiscal sponsor? So, when you enter into a legal agreement with the fiscal sponsor, what are some of the services will you expect this fiscal sponsor to offer you? Number one is banking and accounting. How? Again, they'll be collecting money on your behalf. It could be donations, it could be grants. So basically, they'll be handling this money, and this is where the banking and accounting services comes in. This means that they'll need to put the accountants to work to make sure that your money is not mixed with their money, and at the same time, when the audits are done, everything is compliant with the non-profit laws of the country. The other thing is that their job is to process tax receipts. What do I mean by tax receipts? You see, when you give as a donor who is based in the US, it could be an institution, it could be an individual, an ordinary folk. You will need a tax receipt to prove that you've actually given, and it's through this receipt that the government can process, the US government can process tax refunds for you. That's why they call all the donations donor tax deductible donations. Sorry, that's what they call donations under this arrangement as tax deductible donations. Again, fiscal sponsors ensure that you comply with all the laws of the IRS that govern the non-profits. So all the required filings, the regulatory compliance will be handled by the fiscal sponsor. The other thing is oversight. So they ensure that the money they disperse to your project is being used for the intended purpose. And that this provides credibility among donors. See, ordinary donors also want to know, hey, I'll be contributing to this nonprofit that is based in Kenya. I don't know whether my money will be used for the intended purpose. But then when they see furthermore, a fiscal sponsor who is reputable, who is well resourced, who's been operating for quite some time, they get now the trust. They start getting, relaxed, knowing that there's an oversight body which will ensure that their donation will go and create maximum impact. So, what are some of the best practices for working with fiscal sponsors? Number one, when you receive donations or grants, thank donors consistently. Create a culture of, thanking donors consistently in order to retain them in the long run. Number two, you have to develop a culture of creating fiscal reports. And this again boils down to the agreement you've had with the fiscal sponsor. If the fiscal sponsor tells you, hey, I'll be needing fiscal reports on monthly basis, it's now your obligation to follow that. If it's on quarterly basis, again, you have to align with that timeline. And the goal here is to ensure that there's transparency in the manner in which the money that you're getting from this fiscal sponsor is being used. So you have to create the culture of accountability, transparency within your organization, and that you can only do this by creating periodic reports and forwarding them to the fiscal sponsor so that he can compile these reports and forward them to the IRS, or rather the Internal Revenue Authority. The other thing is ensure mission alignment, and this comes in when you're doing research. When you start researching for fiscal sponsors, don't just go for any fiscal sponsor. You want a fiscal sponsor whose area of interest converges with yours, whose mission and their mission aligns, whose values and your values align. The other thing is you have to clarify fundraising responsibility. This is a very critical component. You see, when you enter into an agreement with a fiscal sponsor, you have two options. One, a fiscal sponsor can take that burden of fundraising for you. And how will they do this? By opening a GoFund page for you and sharing it with its wide base of donors, as you shall see in our case studies section. The other option is uh, a fiscal sponsor onboards you, but then you're the one to undertake the fundraising responsibility. How? So when they onboard you, chances are they'll create a page, a dedicated page for you on their website, as you shall see in our case study. And now they'll give you a link. Now your job is to go to look for all those Americans who are capable of giving or whose interest aligns with your vision and mission. Now you tell them, hey, if you donate to my non-profit outfit, my fiscal sponsor will process you a tax receipt which you can go and demand for a refund from the IRS. Let me repeat this. When you enter into an agreement with a fiscal sponsor, you have two options. Number one, the fiscal sponsor can fundraise on your behalf. The other option is the fiscal sponsor will only help with compliance. But when it comes to fundraising, you have now to take over that, as you shall see in our case study section. So I've taken you through all this, but a question remains: how can you find fiscal sponsors? How can you find fiscal sponsors? I have what? So this is a link to one of the tested and proven directories. Now let me open it so that you can see. So this is how the directory looks like. And when you're doing your research, how can you know whether a particular fiscal sponsor aligns with your mission, your area of interest, your values? I'll give you an example with this. For instance, this one. So you can see here, all the details are here, and you can see all the areas they are interested in: art and culture, children, youth and family, drug treatment, all these areas. Then another thing you have to look for is the eligibility criteria. Under eligibility criteria, usually here you find the information about their geographical coverage. So there are some fiscal sponsors who just operate within the US, but there are others who are worldwide, like this particular fiscal sponsor here. Let me give you an example of a fiscal sponsor who operates within the US only. So we have this particular fiscal sponsor that's based in Houston. So they're telling you their fee is usually 7%, and the eligibility criteria is, your mission and their mission has to line. Another example is this particular fiscal sponsor who sponsored over 100 projects, and they charge 15% of the money they've received on your behalf. What they are looking for is organizations with aligned mission and values. But you see, this particular fiscal sponsor is only restricted to Northwestern California. You can see the areas uh, they are interested in, or rather, their interests. And you can also see the services they offer here. You can also see the model they operate in. I thought I saw. Oh, so here they operate only under Model A. So meaning if you are to enter into a legal agreement with them, you won't have the independence and autonomy. They'll handle everything. See, they'll handle the payroll, tax reporting, the human resource, and everything. And that's why they've restricted uh, their geographic coverage to only North Western California, so that they can be able to offer all these. There are other directories, of course. This is not the only directory. Others are paid. You also have others which are free. The paid ones, they are usually expensive. To maintain your membership there, sometimes you'll be charged about $75 a month. A month. Okay. So how can you contact fiscal sponsors? I've put together some principles of persuasion that you can add into your messaging. It could be the email, it could be DMs. Yeah. And these persuasion principles, they work so well in the business world. And I've also tested them. They work so well also in the non-profit world. And I'll start with the social proof. So people will only say yes to you if others like them have said yes to you before. So how can you apply this social proof into your messaging? Number one, uh, you could showcase past successes and partnerships you've had before. For instance, you could, in your messaging, you could mention some of the funders you've worked with before. The other principle is likability. People will only say yes to you if they like you. And so, how can you cultivate likability? You can cultivate likability by telling emotionally appealing stories. Connect on a personal level by telling people, or rather telling the fiscal sponsor about the organization, unique story, and the impact that you're creating in the ground. Authority and credibility. People will only say yes to you if they perceive you are an authority or a credible expert in your space. And so how can you incorporate this into your messaging, or rather into your outreach strategy? So when you're putting together an email, highlight some of your organization's expertise, track record, and professional standing. Reciprocity. People will only say yes if you give first. So how can you incorporate this into your messaging? Offer valuable information in return, such as detailed reports and compelling impact media. Make them look good. You could also mention them in your social media, in your website, in your program details, and what have you. Unity, the principle of unity. People will only say yes to you if they perceive you and them belong in the same tribe. And when I say tribe, I don't mean the ethnic grouping. I mean it could be shared hobby, shared values, shared mission. It could be shared anything. So when you're putting together an email or any other outreach message, emphasize on the shared values and mission that you have with that particular fiscal sponsor. Last but not the least, commitment. So the principle of commitment. People will only say yes to you if you've demonstrated your dedication before, or rather if you've shown consistency in what you do before. So how can you incorporate this in your messaging? Demonstrate your dedication by showing, tangible progress. You can, you can say, for instance, you can say this, hey, we've already raised 2 million locally. And what we are doing is we are looking for a fiscal sponsor to help us create more impact by helping us scale our project or program. So this is a sample email outreach email, sorry, that incorporates some of those principles that I highlighted. For instance, uh, hey, now put the sponsor name here, put your name here, your CBO, the course you're working on, and then we'll tell a story. And the best story, or rather the template for the best story in the non-profit sector is usually before and after. What do I mean? So if you're able to follow a template of before and after, you'll have a very compelling story, a story that is attracting interest. For instance, you could say, hey, before I came into this space, this is what was going on. There was a lot of teenage pregnancies, a lot. And I checked around, nobody was doing anything to alleviate the problem. So I decided to open my non-profit, and right now, this is the change that I have brought. I have been able to rescue over 1,000 girls, and out of those 1,000 girls, 100 are currently placed in various universities across the world. And out of those 100, we have about 20 doctors who usually donate their time from time to time here in the organization. See, that's a story that combines what was the problem, and then again it combines with the impact you brought, and then inside there it's also bringing in quantifiable results. It's talking about numbers. uh, you could also talk about how much you've already mobilized locally. Again, nobody wants to work with someone who is just starting. At least if you're showing some traction, people, you'll attract people, right? And you you will also stress on the shared mission, shared values, under the principle of unity. And then this is the most important thing. After you've told them all this, what is it that you want them to do? What is it that you want them to do? And obviously, you want to invite them into a Zoom meeting in order to explore the potential partnership. And now, during this meeting, Zoom meeting is where now you pitch your project exhaustively. So ensure that if you're going to use this template, you personalize it based on the sponsor's specific mission and values. So this is a template of how you can go about with your pitching during now the D-Day, when now you're having a Zoom meeting, assuming now that they've accepted your meeting invite and they are ready to come and listen to you. So you could start with a story in order to cultivate likability. And like I said, the best story is the one that take this format, before and after. And this format is actually very popular in the weight loss and fitness industry. For instance, if you see, let's say, an ad of someone who was, let's say, big, let's say was overweight, and then after 2 months of taking a particular weight reducing tablet, now they look fit. You see, now that story looks convincing because you can see what the situation was before intervention and what the situation is after the intervention. The other thing you have to include in your pitching when you're talking to fiscal sponsors is the impact you've created. And when you're talking about impact, you also have to quantify it. Talk in numbers. Use the numbers language in order to position yourself as an authority in what you're talking about. Now, the other thing, stress on the shared mission. So cultivate the principle of unity by stressing on the shared mission, vision, values, and what have you. Now, last but not the least, demonstrate your commitment to the mission by highlighting your past projects, the people you've collaborated with, and what have you. Again, they are looking for someone who is capable of being consistent, not someone who will fall at the first sign of trouble. They want that consistency. So, how can you make your nonprofit appealing to fiscal sponsors? Obviously, you need a website and a YouTube channel where you can be documenting your mission successes, where you can be documenting videos or rather video stories that are showcasing the before and after. And also, you have to normalize recording interviews with beneficiaries. Again, let those who you are helping tell their stories firsthand. This is what fiscal sponsors like to hear. So these are the case studies that I promised earlier on. Now, I've segmented these case studies into two. The first case study is a case where a fiscal sponsor fundraises for you. Now we have this particular fiscal sponsor that opened a GoFundMe page. Uh, so this particular client is based in Mathare. The client name is New Mercy Schools. And as you can see, this is a match that the fiscal sponsor was able to raise on behalf of this particular school. So this particular fiscal sponsor seemed to have a huge network of donors, and that's why they were able to accomplish this. So this school is based in Mathare. Feel free to do a quick Google search and see, verify. It's called New Mercy Care Schools. So the other example of a fiscal sponsor working with an African-based nonprofit is here. But then this particular case study, the fiscal sponsor isn't the one who is doing the fundraising task. Isn't the one who is the fiscal sponsor is not the one handling the fundraising responsibilities. So we have the case of this particular fiscal sponsor who is working with various non-profits that are based in Africa. So this is one of their clients. This particular non-profit is based in Uganda. It's called Friends of Uganda Refugee. Let's see. And note one thing: this particular fiscal sponsor has created a page, a donation page, dedicated for this non-profit, where people can come donate. Now, the job of this particular non-profit, uh, Friends of Uganda Refugees, can now take this link and go look for donors. And obviously, the best platforms, or rather the low-hanging platforms, are LinkedIn. Could use Facebook and X. Just go look for American citizens. Talk to them, talk about the impact you're creating, and the most important thing that you're working with a fiscal sponsor, meaning that if they donate to your nonprofit, they are going to get a tax receipt which they can take it to the IRS to request for a tax refund. And they are not only working with this particular nonprofit that's based in Uganda, they're also working with another one that's based in Ghana. Let me check it out. Yeah, we have one that is based in Ghana. Uh, Here it is. It's called the Spacey Project. As you can see, and this is a goal that they've set. Seems like they are not giving us data on how much they collected, whether they were able to beat this goal or not. So basically, a quick recap: if when okay, a fiscal sponsor can either fundraise on your behalf, or they'll give you the compliance, and now your job will be to do the fundraising. So, what do fiscal sponsors look for? Of course, they are looking for mission alignment. They are looking for non-profits whose interests converges with theirs. So you must work to complement their organizational goals. Again, they are looking to see whether your project has growth potential. Is it scalable? The other thing is they are looking for organizations with strong impact stories, compelling narratives of change and transformation. The other thing, they are looking for organizations with the culture of transparent reporting, organizations that are willing to document and share their results. So this is a typical fiscal sponsorship journey. Number one, you do the research from the directory. One of the directories I've already shared with you. There are others which I'm gonna be sharing with you via email. I already have your emails. Now, when you're doing research, obviously you wanna look for organizations whose geographical coverage is beyond the United States, preferably worldwide. You also want to look for organizations whose mission and your mission align. And then once you narrow down a list of fiscal sponsors whose mission and your mission align, the second thing is to do an outreach. Sending personalized emails using the persuasion principles I took you through earlier. Assuming you've sent personalized emails and you've received, and fiscal sponsors are accepting your meeting invite. Your job now is to put together a strong pitch deck and present yourself to the meeting. Present your story, your impact, and vision. Now, assuming that they are convinced, formalize the relationship through a legal agreement. And it is during this time you have to clarify whether they'll be fundraising for you or they're just giving you compliance, but then you undertake the fundraising burden. And then, assuming you've agreed on that, you also have to know which model you're operating under. Is it model A, which has no independence, which has no autonomy, or is it model C, which provides you with independence, autonomy? And then the last thing is deliver on the impact. Once you receive the money from fiscal sponsors after a period of time, your job is to deliver what you promised. So, what are some of the challenges do non-profits come across when they are working with fiscal sponsors? Obviously, the number one is finding the right sponsor, the sponsor whose mission and your mission align. And the solution there is to do an extensive and deep research using the directories that are out there. Fee negotiation is another challenge. There are fiscal sponsors who are likely to charge you more than 15%. So here you have to negotiate. Now, the best way to negotiate, first of all, is to demonstrate the potential value, the potential impact your project is gonna bring. The other thing is reporting requirements. The organizations that don't have strong reporting processes. So when you enter into a legal agreement with a fiscal sponsor, number one thing you should do is to come up with a clear process of reporting, so that you're not caught behind when they need, those monthly reports or those quarterly reports, what have you. So this brings us to the end of this webinar, and your next steps after here should go out there and research for fiscal sponsor, viable fiscal sponsors whose mission and your mission align. Then prepare your outreach messages, prepare your pitch deck, and now make contact. So I have some of the questions I usually receive from uh, from non-profits. And one of the question is, how much does a fiscal sponsor usually charge? There are fiscal sponsors who will ask you to pay an upfront fee of, let's say, $500. It varies, but there are those who will tell you, hey, we'll onboard you, but the amount we're gonna collect will charge between 8 and 15% commission fee. So another common question I usually get is, how do I know if a fiscal sponsor is trustworthy? In those directories, uh, check when that particular fiscal sponsor started operating. Secondly, you can do a quick internet research and look for reviews. You want to look for reviews. What are other nonprofits saying about that particular fiscal sponsor? Also, check the transparency in fees. If you find the fees they are charging are super exorbitant, that's a huge red flag. The other question I get is, why not open a satellite office in the US rather than going, to the trouble of doing the research, narrowing down a list of potential fiscal sponsors and all that. Well, registering your own nonprofit in the US is very lengthy and expensive process, which takes between 12 and 18 months. Now, this means that sorry about that. So this means that you're gonna need lawyers, you're gonna need accountants to help with the compliance side of things. So opening an office in the US is not an advisable move because it's very expensive and lengthy in terms of incorporating and registering. So this brings us to the end of this webinar. Uh, Thank you for your attendance. Let me know uh, your feedback. Uh, I'll be sharing my email so that if you wanna reach out and ask more questions or you want a personalized advice, feel free to reach out. Thank you. Bye.